research around community beneficiation, our focus was really on how do we sort of rewrite the narrative or the extractive narratives that African industrial development has laid historically, right? So typically Africa is known as the continent that has a lot to offer, but has benefited the least from the exploitation of those resources. And new and exciting industries like green hydrogen offer us the opportunity to reevaluate how we do business, how we grow industries, particularly along the lines of becoming more generative and less extractive and exploitative in how these industries grow. And that was kind of the focus, or the theoretical focus, of how we explored the research for this particular report. And we explored the different benefit sharing models that were designed and applied, and how they were applied, and what their impact has been, in order to recommend shifts in how things are done and considered and designed for the green hydrogen industry. What we found is really interesting. So the ecosystem on paper exists for community benefit sharing in the South African ecosystem. Our legislation is sound, our plans are great, and one of the challenges that we consistently have is and we all know as South Africans, is rather poor implementation or execution of those plans, and there's very little focus on monitoring and evaluation. So a key recommendation coming out of the report is that we focus a lot more on the execution of the intention, the implementation of plans and projects, as well as consider how we monitor and evaluate the impact of those projects. We also know, what we've also learned since doing the research on this project, is that there's also a challenge between the alignment of development priorities between what the private sector needs versus what the public sector requires contractually, but then also what communities require, right? And what we try to demonstrate in our recommendations is the bridging of priorities from a private sector perspective, which is usually around, profit making and risk mitigation. So aligning those development priorities with community priorities, which is around growth and education and empowerment and opportunity. Limitation, or the sobering limitation that we must always consider in these kinds of very idealistic considerations, is that the private sector is limited in its ability to act, right? It's limited by the fact that the purpose of the private sector is essentially to generate economic growth, to create profits for its own investors, and that responsibility doesn't extend necessarily to ensuring community well-being. So one of our key recommendations in the report is aligning the strategies and the plans between the private sector and the public sector, so that the private sector can enable the public sector's achievement of some of their more complex goals around societal well-being and societal opportunity generation. What has not been done, and the work that has not been done in this community benefit sharing discussion, as we haven't done the work to discuss what the individual departure points are of the three key stakeholders in the ecosystem, and then align them, so that when somebody deploys a project, then everybody else is satisfied that they are deploying a project that is intended for the community benefit and meets the levels of satisfaction or expectation. If the reality of the situation is that everything we've tried before has not resulted in the required outcome, what are we going to do differently this time?